Today is the day we're going to be discussing in great depth and great detail, and later on in a more practical nature, herbs and herbology. But I want to start this morning with a verse that means a lot to me from Nahum chapter 1 and verse 7. Because we were discussing at the breakfast table this morning some of what's about to come to pass relative to the time of trouble and all of the uncertainties of life. This is a verse that is easy to memorize and would be well for us to tuck away in our minds that we can draw upon it. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and He knoweth them that trust in Him. He's not going to forget about you. I don't care what kind of troubles and trials and persecution that you're in. He's quite aware of what's going on and who you are, and He knows how committed you are to Him. And if you've got a solid relationship with Jesus Christ, you can rest assured that He has your best interest at heart and that He is working out the final details of your salvation, even though you may be undergoing some really trying times. You know that God the Father did not abandon Jesus while Jesus was on the cross or in the Garden of Gethsemane. I want to share a couple of quotations with you as well to kind of start our morning. This is from Selected Messages, Book 2, page 294. The Lord has given some simple herbs of the field that at times are beneficial. And sometimes, before I finish this, I run into these people who have very, very sophisticated, herbally derived food supplements or herbal concoctions of some sort or another, and they feel like that for some reason that this has become the medical missionary work. But this isn't what counsel tells us. It says, the Lord has given some simple herbs of the field. Let's don't get this thing so complicated that we are becoming bio-friendly allopaths, okay? We're working with simple things. The natural remedies, the remedies that God has given us ought to be simple. They need to be inexpensive. It doesn't make sense to me that we would go out as medical missionaries and hook people on $125 a month habits, even though that it comes from natural sources. This is on page 61 in the little book, The Final Work. Selected Messages, Book 2, 294. The Lord has given some simple herbs of the field that at times are beneficial. And if every, not if some, but if every family were educated in how to use these herbs in case of sickness, much suffering might be prevented, and no doctor need be called. These old-fashioned, simple herbs used intelligently would have recovered many sick. The problem is we're so ignorant as to regard to all of these things that are growing all over in our backyards and in our neighbor's field and everywhere else. I have a sense of urgency in my heart every day that we need to accelerate what we're doing. I wish that it had been in someone else's heart 100 years ago and stayed there. I wish that more people would have grown warmer instead of colder. Then our job would not be so difficult right now. Over across the page on page 60, it says from the Paulson collection, page 109, that which should have been done 20, yea, more than 20 years ago. When do you think she wrote that? Can I paraphrase this and say 120 years ago? Is now to be done speedily. The work will be more difficult to do now than it would have been years ago, but it will be done. Amen. And boy, the years have turned up the intensity on that statement.
What was that quote?
That's from Paulson collection, page 109. 20 years ago, friends, she's talking about. And this, I don't know the date on this, but you know, she died in 1915. We can't go past that. I'm guessing this is about 100 to 120 years ago she wrote this. So we're looking at roughly 100 to 120 years ago. She said that this should have been 20 years done before that, and at that time it was going to be difficult to do now. We got a tough job. But I don't think we should wimp out just because we've got a tough job. Let's hang in there and let's go to work, and let's praise the Lord for the opportunity to work for Him. We're going to be talking about herbology all day today, and we're going to be covering better than 80 herbs. Now I want to reiterate what I told you yesterday, because I don't remember if it was on camera or not. Some people come to me and they say, why are you spending so much time with so many herbs? And I mean, they really are indignant. I mean, they have righteous indignation against me. Ellen White says a few simple herbs. That's right, a few simple herbs. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I'm talking to an audience of people who live all across the United States, people who live in other lands around the world, and I don't know, I just don't have whatever it takes to only talk to one person at a time with this video or these classes, and to know exactly where they live and what few herbs are in their yard. So I give you a broad range of herbs so that wherever you live, you should be able to find a few simple herbs based on what you've learned. And perhaps you may move from one locale to the other, or you may be a mobile medical missionary traveling from one locale to the other, and it will do you well to be able to recognize more than just as what is in your own backyard today, because next week you may have a whole new set of parameters to deal with. So we're going to start on A, and we're going to end up on the end of the alphabet. And these are semi-alphabetical. They're not exactly alphabetical. These are rough notes for the book that I'm writing on herbology, and they're not completely alphabetical. I've found a few places where I had something that was a little bit askew here, and I'll try and catch it as I go, but I might miss it. Herb books, or herbology books, are very difficult for us to deal with. You'll notice that we've got the very pretty color pictures here. Most of the herbal books from years gone by, and even a lot of those that are out in the market today, have line drawings. Well, when I look at the line drawings, I'm not sure that I can tell the difference between poison ivy and I don't know, half a dozen other things from line drawings. And I certainly would not go out and try field harvesting things based on a line drawing book. It's dangerous, it's foolish. Unless I already knew what the plant was, then I would try it, but then why would I need the line drawing, because I already know what it is. So I wanted books that have colored pictures. If you're going to purchase a book for field identification, get one that has some colored pictures. This is an excellent book that I have in front of us here for colored pictures. And it's got some valid information inside. The only thing that I don't like about this book is its cover. You notice it says The New Age Herbalist. Ellen White told us many years ago that if we did not do that which we should with our message, that God would take it from us and give it to the heathen. Well, that's been done many years ago. And now we are coming from behind, trying to develop what we have as our heritage as medical missionaries, and now it's all polluted with heathenism, and we're having to try to find a way to purify it. Hopefully by the end of the year, or not this year, but the end of next year, I will have been able to take all the notes that I have, travel across the United States, and get color pictures of every plant, and have that set up in my book so that I have colored pictures in a Christian, a Seventh-day Adventist, conservative book with no New Age nonsense in it, no yin and no yang and no macrobiotic diet and no little pictures of people in the yoga position and all this kind of rot that's in these books. I hope I get it done by midsummer and have it ready to be published. But in the meantime, we're going to have to be mature Christians and do the best we can with what we have. But do not use the information contained in these books as a gospel. I like the pictures. In fact, I've been tempted to cut the pictures out and put them in a 3-ring binder and throw the rest of the book away, and that's probably a good idea. Here's another book. This is a safe book without a whole lot of rot in it. Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss. Jethro Kloss was a man that I admire because he had a tremendous vision and a tremendous capability to do practical things himself. And he was good at teaching people back in his day. The problem with Brother Kloss's book is that you have to know something already to use it. You pick up his book and it does not give you any specific instructions about what to do with much of anything. And my first exposure to this book was very sort of disheartening, because I would see all these herbs listed for a various condition, and it's like, well, which one should I use out of there? All of them? One of them? How much should I use? How would I know what my dosage would be? What's the safe level? And for sure, what's it good for? And could I combine any of these? All of those things were missing. I shared my frustration with a naturopathic physician who said, son, it's because you don't know anything, the book doesn't work. He said, if you knew something, it'd be great. And I was a little disgusted with him when he told me that, but you know, as time has gone on through the years, I've discovered that he was very accurate. If you have a good background, this is a good reminder guide. Helps you remember, oh yeah, that would work. But see, you already know how to use all the things in there. You already know the safe dosages for everything, and this is just kind of a cheat sheet to help you not forget. But you know, there's some good nutritional information in there as well. I think this book is well worth having in the library. Let's start out on A and let's go for Z. You've got plenty of paper to take notes on? Okay. Anybody who doesn't have sufficient paper to take good notes? Okay, no hands waving. I guess let's take off. Our very first one that I want to talk about is the aloe plant. And I could stay up here all day and talk about the aloe plant, but I'm not going to. But I want to just share some basics. As I go through this, I'm going to be telling you what the plant's name is. I'm going to typically tell you what the Latin name is for most of these plants. I'm going to tell you what other names that, local names, colloquial names that people use. And I'm going to tell you the parts to use. I'm going to tell you the applications and the uses. In my book, I will have all the chemical constituents as well. So for the biochemists who want to know why it's there or what it's there, but we'd spend hours with me tripping over my tongue trying to pronounce a lot of these names. I'm also going to give you the safe dosage and how to use it. So you're going to feel pretty comfortable with all these things. With the aloe plant, we're going to be using the leaf. Many herbalists will use a whole leaf. I like to break it down in more than one way. Many times I like to take the leaf and open it up, and there's like what we call a jelly fillet inside. That's the part that I use most of the time. The outside has some very bitter sap qualities to it, and it also has a little, some like tannins and things in it, and it's a tremendous bowel cleanser. But most of the time when you want aloe, you don't necessarily want to open the floodgates. If you're going to deal with an ulcer, you don't want to be purging the colon to death the whole time you're doing it. So I like to split it open, throw the outer part away, and use just what's on the inside. Now, what's a safe dosage? Well, with the aloe plant, I guess you could eat as much as you could get down and not throw back up, and it's pretty much a safe dosage. It doesn't have any side effects. There are typically no cautions. It's not a problem, for pregnancy and the other signs that we normally would give a caution for some of the herbs. You can use as much as you want. Applications and uses. Internally, aloe juice or the aloe jelly fillets, however you want to use them, are excellent for healing ulcers. They are beneficial for ulcerative colitis, diverticulitis. There's a number of uses. We know that the mucopolysaccharide that is contained in the gel, it's called acetylated mannan, is excellent for correcting digestive chemistries, enhancing the immune system. We have receptor sites in our intestinal tract that are programmed to receive specific nutrition levels of nutrients that are in a particular biochemical state. And it's kind of like the timing on a car. Your distributor is supposed to fire. Well, if you get off time, your engine doesn't run. If you get your biochemistry messed up so that you don't have the right chemical format at the right particular site, you don't get good nutrition, you don't get good absorption, and then maybe will pass on out, or it'll turn into fermentation or putrefaction or whatever. The aloe has a tendency, if you take it before the meals, for people who are, especially immune-depressed people, people who have a suppressed immune system, almost invariably have this problem. And if you'll give a lot of this aloe juice or aloe gel to these people before their meals, you know, starting out like a half hour before, you'll be able to correct a lot of this digestive chemistry misfire, and their immune system will take off and begin to fire and work again, and they'll begin to be stronger because they're getting more of the nutrition out of their food, and you're going to have a compounding, rebounding effect. Our next one that we're going to deal with, well, I forgot. Let's talk about external applications. I have to remember, external and internal is the way we approach many things. Internal, external, we always want to think. And maybe the external is hydrotherapy, maybe the internal is nutrition, maybe it's herbs. We always try to think of as many ways as we can deal with the problem. We don't want to become biofriendly allopathic practitioners and always just popping a pill or a capsule or a tincture. American Crane's Bill, I'm getting ahead of myself again, I forgot. External. I just want to get to this herb. I like this one. The external, we know it works excellent for skin conditions, burns. I like to mix it with honey and vitamin E oil for a burn, rashes of any kind. We can use it in the eye. I've had people tell me not to use it in the eye, but I had an eye infection that was very, very irritating and didn't want to heal. And my eye just hurt, and it was red, and it burned. I just took some of that jelly and squeezed it right out of the leaf, right down onto my eyeball, and blinked it around in there. And of course, you know, it was bleary to see out of after that, but it absorbed all of the toxicity that was in my eye because of the infection, and it soothed it. All of the red went away, and within a couple of days I could see again.
Does that work on a sty?
It would work on a sty. The only problem is it can't get in at it quite as well. Aloe doesn't have a way or a mechanism to get in things or through things like some herbs will. Perhaps you know, some of the other things might be able to penetrate a little better. It doesn't have a carrier agent or a carrier solvent in it that will penetrate through tissue. Now I finally get to my American Crane's Bill. American Crane's Bill is also known as a geranium. It's the wild geranium. And there are several varieties of wild geranium, but the usages are predominantly the same. In France, they have a blue wild geranium, they have a pink, they have a spotted. In the United States, we have a pink, sort of spotted, semi-spotted version, and they're not as much like the domestic geranium as we would normally think. They don't have that peculiar, awful smell. Like, you know, that's one thing as a child. My mom had geraniums in the window, and they were pretty, but I sure hated to get anywhere near them because they smelled so terrible. The part that we use is the rhizome. Do you know the difference between a root and a rhizome? Okay. A root is something that branches and it's thread-like or it's cord-like, and it, you know, kind of travels through the soil for a ways and then terminates. A rhizome is actually more like a tuber that has roots growing off of it. Some plants do not have rhizomes. Some plants only have roots and rootlets. Others do have. Rhizome is spelled R-H-I-Z-O-M-E. R-H-I-Z-O-M-E. Now, you know what root spelled like. You're not going to have a problem with that one.
So rhizome would be like a carrot?
Yeah. Now, typically we'd call that a tuber more than, but it's almost in that ballpark. I'll show you an example of a rhizome today when we have an opportunity to do that. Our applications and uses, the Crane's Bill or the geranium, if you powder the herb, it is tremendous for stopping bleeding. You can use it externally or internally. I have found for people who have like a bleeding ulcer or a bleeding ulcerative colitis, where the bowels are actually bleeding or the ulcer is bleeding, you can take the powder and you can either take it in encapsulated form. I probably would make a decoction because you'd have better coverage with a decoction where you would have a fluid that would cover everything and have a uniform flow through. But it will stop the bleeding or internal hemorrhaging almost immediately. Clots that up and cauterizes and shuts it off right away and doesn't cause any other side effects while it's there. It also, if you'll make a decoction, is an excellent gargle for sore throats, although it will not kill like strep or some of these other things. But for a viral sore throat or an irritated sore throat, it's pretty healing. You can use it for diarrhea, although it's probably not going to be the first choice for diarrhea, but it will work because it has an astringent quality to it. It will work in cases of diarrhea. The way to use this particular plant is either an infusion or a decoction, and I want to explain that a little bit. Do you know the difference between an infusion and a decoction? Okay, we're going to get into that when we do the hands-on thing. A decoction is what we do with heavy things, and an infusion is what we do with light things. Light things are like, what we do with these leaves. We call these the aerial parts of the plant. And we just pop those in our little cup or our little kettle, and we pour some boiling water over the top and put a lid on it and let it steep, and that's an infusion. A decoction is when we have bark or seeds or roots or rhizomes where they're heavy. And it's going to take a little while to extract the biochemical properties we want out. We can't just readily get them out because they're deep in, and we're going to have to find a way to extract it. So we'll simmer those for a time, sometimes 15 to 45 minutes, for as long as it takes to get in. And some of that you're going to have to use your thinking cap and think, well, how long do I let this go? Well, it's going to have to do with in what sizes or particles you have this broken down. If you have a big root like this and you're going to plop it in, well, that's one thing. But if it's all chopped up fairly fine, that's not going to take nearly as long to extract out of. So you have to just use a little bit of kitchen common sense. What you will do with this is the dosage for it in an infusion or decoction. And how do you know whether you do which with what? Because this is a root or a rhizome, it's a little bit complicated. Today we buy many of the things commercially powdered. And a powdered root is so close to an aerial part in consistency now because it's been powdered that you could say I could make an infusion out of a powder, which normally I would have made a decoction out of. Sounds a little bit confusing. But let's say that you went out and dug your own plant. You found it in the woods. I would take like a hatchet and chop it into slices, something to get it smaller so that the water doesn't have to work so hard to get in. And at that point, you drop it into your water. You're going to use a teaspoon of the granules that you cut up, or particles, whatever you want to call it. You've chopped up with a hatchet or a big knife or pounded it with a hammer or whatever, some way to break it up a little bit. But about a teaspoon of the plant to 1 cup of water. That's the rate that you would use. And you will simmer that for about 15 to 20 minutes. And the dose now is based on your liquid that you have, your tea or your decoction. And you want to use 1/2 cup per application until you've achieved your desired goal of stopping the bleeding. On the outside, you could either use the liquid if you're bleeding and pour that all over the wound and to stop the bleeding, or you can apply the powder right onto the cut and instantly stop your bleeding. And there you use as needed. It's a topical or an external application. Arnica is another plant we want to talk about. Have you used arnica before? You're aware of what arnica is all about? Arnica is A-R-N-I-C-A. We're going to be using primarily the dried flowers from the arnica plant. Various plants have various beneficial chemicals in them, but we're having to do some experimenting to know exactly where they have what in them, because sometimes it's all in the flower and not in the leaf. Sometimes it's in the bud and it's not anywhere else. Sometimes it's only in the root, or it's only in the rhizome, or it's only in the stem. And it's taken people a lot of years of work to figure out where what is. So I'll be sharing the parts so that you don't have that confusion. They do use other parts of the plant, but the flower is primarily the strongest part of the plant that has the most of the chemical in it. The normal use for this plant is for extracts and oils, and we use it for joint pain, topical pain, like you would use an external analgesic for when you've got aches and pains. Sometimes people will use it in a gel, like if their gums are hurting or that type of thing, but it's not a plant that we would usually think of using it internally. It has some internal uses, but should only be used by someone who really has some experience in using it internally. I wouldn't use it internally unless I really felt I needed to, but if you did, your internal usage might be about 2 or 3 capsules a day. You could run into some side effects with this one. But if you would make like an infused oil, you could save that, or you could actually take your infused oil and turn that into a salve, and you could put it over an aching knee or an aching wrist, or someplace you've got some localized arthritis that's really painful. Arnica is really, really effective at getting rid of that pain. Or you can make an oil extract or a tincture, and maybe put a little bit of camphor, a little bit of peppermint, or a little bit of wintergreen or something like that to help drive it in deeper. And really, really good, you know, especially with elderly people who've had an injury and now you've gotten like osteoarthritis in a joint and it's always aching. I've seen people get really good use out of arnica gel or arnica oils on that. You know, it's not a cure, it's a temporary, but it does allay the pain for some time. Astragalus, now I want to spell that for you, A-S-T-R-A-G-A-L-U-S. I don't know if I'm going too fast with these, or...
Do it again.
A-S-T-R-A-G-A-L-U-S. Has some other names. Some people call it milk vetch. Some people call it, I think, Huang Qi. It's a Chinese, primarily a Chinese plant, although the use of this one has been pretty universal around the world. There are, you know, we could spend days on just Chinese herbs. The Chinese are really big into herbology. The problem with their herbology is it's all based on spiritualism, and I've avoided it. You know, they have it all broken down into wood and fire and wind and all this kind of thing, and now the New Age hippies have all gone hog wild over this.
Did you say that was a vetch?
Well, it's called milk vetch.
Is it a vetch?
I don't know whether it's actually in the same family or not. I haven't looked up its botanical tree to see if it's in the exact same family or not. We're going to be using the roots, and I suspect that if it is actually a vetch, it's a very strange cousin, because the roots on this one are very large, where your regular vetch has a very small root on it. This is a very large root, very, you know, big rhizome type thing on it. What I use it for is building the immune system. Do you remember ever taking out a vase of flowers? What the water in the vase smelled like after about 4 days or whatever, you know, bleh. That's what this smells and tastes like. So you may have a little hard time getting people to accommodate the flavor. But it builds and strengthens the immune system, and there's a lot of scientific validation for this, especially in Europe, where herbology is not viewed as quackery. They used this with several control studies on cancer and discovered that their recovery rates for cancer patients were significantly higher on those who had it versus those who didn't have it, irregardless of what other therapies they were using with it. It did seem to strengthen the human immune system significantly. And I have found for my own use that it does that as well. It's not a fast-acting herb. It isn't like, man, I'm thinking I might get a cold or I might get the flu. I'm going to take this. Well, you will have already gotten the flu or the cold and gotten rid of it by the time this stuff begins to work. It acts very slow. It's something that you use on a long-term basis. You know, maybe 6 weeks before it's actually really picked your immune system up. But when it has, it's like a train car that's rolling at 3 miles an hour. It looks like you could just reach out there and stop it, right? Well, all of us in the room couldn't stop it. It's going to roll on past us because of the momentum. This is the way this particular plant works. It strengthens the digestive system as well as building the immune system. We can use it in long-term fatigue because it supports normal adrenal function. Many people have problems where their glands are not functioning properly and they have no adrenaline in their blood and they're walking around dragging and tired all the time. And this one can work quite well for that. I've also noticed that it works well if you have somebody who is sick and they've just got these debilitating sweats to where they're just sweating and sweating and sweating beyond what's normal and they're getting weaker from it. A good decoction of this, strong decoction several times, many times has an adaptogenic effect, and it'll stop that and give them a chance to rehydrate and gain their strength again. I mentioned the word adaptogenic, and strangely enough, this particular plant has the ability for those who need to break into a sweat to make that a little easier. And so you maybe would mix this with yarrow or something where you wanted somebody to have a sweat. We have found that it is mildly healing for people with chronic ulcers, and we're not sure if it's just soothing or if it actually perhaps may defeat the H. pylori bacteria that's in the gut that has a possibility potential for causing the ulcer in the first place. I'm not really sure, but it has demonstrated to be pretty effective in dealing with long-term ulcerative patients. It has a mild, and I mean very mild, diuretic effect. You probably wouldn't say it's your first choice or even your second or third choice as a diuretic, but it does have some diuretic effect. If you want to use it just from the root, we buy the roots in slices. They look kind of like tongue depressors. They're, you know, sliced off and they look like a little flat stick. You take one of those to 2 cups of water and simmer it for about 20 minutes. Let it cool. And you drink that. If you're in a mild condition, one pint of that every other day. If you're in a serious condition, you might drink a pint every day rather than every other day. If you've purchased it in a powdered form, you can do the same thing again, just take an equivalent mass of the material, or you can encapsulate it. And the encapsulated dose would be 6 of the single-aught capsules every day. Looks like I see Penn still writing there for just a second, so I won't zoom on to our next plant.
So the powder you don't work with water?
You can use the powder with water, and what I typically do with the powder is I drop it in a little coffee filter and staple it shut, and I have a tea bag made and I don't have to strain the junk out of the water again. Yeah. I'm lazy. I don't do anything I don't have to, and if I don't have to clean a kettle, I'm not going to. Dean?
So these things work better if you actually get your salivary glands involved with it too, so that it'll assimilate better?
To some extent, if you've got your enzymes there, you're going to break them down a little better, but you don't have to do a whole lot of digestion involved with most of this because it's so fine. And The stomach acids are basically working as solvents just to extract it out, and the chemical is really what you're after. You're not dealing with the carbohydrates or the fats or the proteins to try and break down molecules. You're really just trying to do solvent extraction. And what's in your gut normally will do a pretty good job of that. As far as what's most effective, a powdered capsule is not as effective as an infusion or a decoction, because your body has to work where if you've done it the other way, the stove and the pan already did all the work. Barberry is our next one. And barberry is an extremely useful plant. It's known as bearberry to some people, wood sour to other, pepper ridge bush. It's got a lot of different names. Sourberry, yeah, there's a lot of names for it out there, but barberry is its most common, most frequent used, and you'll find the barberry in most books. We use the bark the most. You can use the root bark as well, and some people use the dried berries, but those are infrequent uses. The most common use is going to be the bark, just from the plant itself. Externally, in preparations, it is significantly useful for killing bacteria. You can use it on wounds. You can use it as an antiseptic wash. Internally, in significant or large enough doses, you can use it as a laxative. Although I think I'd find other things to use, but if I don't have other things, I want to remember this because this may be what I have. Almost any of your barks have enough tannins in them to work well towards increasing the peristaltic action and causing the laxative effect. It will slow a rapid heart rate. It will slow respiration down a little bit if you have somebody who feels like they're going to hyperventilate and they're panting away. I use it almost exclusively, however, as a liver cleanser. And I probably will mix it with dandelion when I do this in half and half. But it is very bitter, and it will cause the liver to purge significantly, dramatically. It will really purge. And if you have what in the old days we called torpid liver, it's going to cause that liver to just really clean itself out. Your liver is basically going to be just dumping, and whatever is in your liver is going to be out and through your digestive system, and you're going to have a fresh supply of something. And so if we're going to talk about a liver rebuild or a liver cleanse, this is where the foundation where we're really going to start, is with this particular herb.
Are you using the dandelion root with that? Or
Yeah,
the plant or
it'd be
both?
the root. 'Cause you could use the leaf, but I try to use similar things with each other just for ease of use. And again, you've got more of the tannins in the dandelion root than you would have in a leaf. Let's talk about a dosage. If it's powdered, we've got 2 to 4 of the single-out capsules 3 times daily for a maximum dose. If you want to use less, that's fine. Use your head on it. If you want to make a decoction or a tea, I'd say 1 cup 3 times a day, preferably before your meal and not after your meal.
Excuse me, one more.
Okay, 1 cup 3 times a day, and that'd be before your meals and not after your meals. However, sometimes people will eat something and pretty soon they'll be over there holding onto the liver going, oh, or their gallbladder. Oh, that really hurts. Oh, I shouldn't have eaten that rotten peanut butter. That stuff's got all that oil and fat in it, and I shouldn't have eaten that cheese or, whatever. And you can give them a nice big cup of this, and within a few minutes it'll take care of the problem.
When you say peanut butter, you mean all peanut butter is rotten?
Well, it doesn't digest very well. It's kind of a fat putty. You know, we eat it.
As bad as a chocolate egg.
Is it as bad as a mushroom?
No, it's not as well. Yes and no. The problem with the peanuts is the peanuts are all harvested and put in big gigantic piles to dry and to age and all this type of thing. And they grow little tiny, tiny microscopic mold spores all through them, which contain what we call aflatoxins. And they are murder on your liver because it's like taking poison in. So raise your own peanuts and don't let them get moldy, or if you're going to be using peanut butter, use it very sparingly. Your body can handle some of it. But you know, they did a study and discovered that Adventists were dying of liver cancers about as fast as anybody else was, and they couldn't figure out why, and they began to wonder if maybe this had something to do with it. I know peanut butter sandwiches are pretty American and unfortunately pretty Adventist. Anyway, let's go to bladderwrack. Some of you should recognize bladderwrack as a sea vegetable or a sea plant. I'm a little cautious about taking things out of the ocean and eating them anymore. Back in the old days, they were really great, but we've turned our oceans as the final and ultimate sewer of the world. We're dumping so much junk into our oceans that I kind of want to know where they harvested it at. Was it right out in the mouth of San Francisco Bay? Yeah, anywhere but San Francisco Bay. San Francisco Bay happens to be where they make most of the sea salt for this country too. They take that bay water and they bring it in and they, you know, store it up and get salt out of it. So I think I'll get my salt out of the ground where somebody hasn't pottied in it. But bladderwrack is a kelp. It's a type of plant, especially San Francisco. I don't have anything against people from San Francisco, but there happens to be a very large percentage of the world's population that's dying from well-known disease down there. And if you look at the biblical standards on quarantine and avoidance of people who are ill, it doesn't make sense to put it on my table. Applications and uses for this plant, we're going to be using the use is the entire plant. Typically dry and powder the whole plant. In the old days, it was used to combat obesity. They'd see chubby people and say, here, you need some bladderwrack. This will take care of that. And I suspect because of the fact that bladderwrack is so high in organic iodines that perhaps it was supporting normal thyroid function on these people who were not able to get normal iodine anywhere else. And they began to feel better because their metabolism leveled out because their thyroid gland was working right. Has a lot of iodine in it, and that's probably why it was doing that. It lowers the body's ability to store fat. So if your neighbor's trying to fatten up his pigs out there and you want to do him a rotten trick, throw a bunch of bladderwrack in the trough when he's not looking, and he's gonna have a hard time with his piggies. I think it's a good plant in working with like rheumatism, arthritis, that type of thing. It is really high in a wide spectrum of trace minerals. So even though I may be a little concerned about using it because where it came from, I wouldn't have a problem with shredding it up all over my garden and then having my plants get all of the minerals out of the soil that it places in there, and then having my produce out of my garden being more nutritious mineral-wise than it would be otherwise. Many times with people with rheumatism and arthritis, if they just had the right blends of trace minerals in their bodies, they would alleviate some of the discomfort of their symptoms quite a bit. In fact, I have even heard of people who turned around and their immune system was able to stabilize and no longer have that problem simply from adding a lot of trace minerals. But it's not the panacea for arthritis. Dean?
Is this stuff common enough or inexpensive enough to do what you were just talking about, to replenish your soil content with that?
You can buy it commercially. I don't know exactly where, but you can buy like 50-pound bags of dried kelp for your garden. And if you look around hard enough, you can find it in quantities where you can actually afford to do that. and add it to your compost. It's very rich in minerals. Now some people actually get like kelp liquids and spray it on their soil, and that works as well, but the sprays don't add the humus quite as nicely. You can use it externally for compresses or plasters for the local inflammation and swelling that's associated with arthritis. Really works really well. You'd heat it up, make a compress out of the tea, or you could actually just take and plaster the whole mass right over the area and then poultice it up. If you're going to use it internally, the best dosage I like is in powder, and I would say 6 of the single-lot capsules daily would be about the right dosage to have the right amount of trace minerals in your body. Black cohosh is where we're headed next. That's a familiar herb to many people who've dealt with herbs. Some people don't realize that there is a danger in using black cohosh if they use too much, but it's an excellent muscle relaxant. And you know, we have two different types of muscle in our body. We have voluntary and involuntary. And if you took enough of it, you could have your heart and respiration so relaxed that they didn't do anything. So you want to use this one with some common sense, because you don't want to be just, oh, so relaxed that you forget to breathe or have your heart go any longer. It's also known in some areas as squaw root, some places as snake root. We use the root and rhizome. This is one that has a fairly significant distribution of both. Has a tremendous list of chemical constituents. It's really a phytochemical rich plant. I use it primarily, like I said, as an antispasmodic. It's a muscle relaxer. You have people who have severe spasms of any kind, muscle spasms. You have someone with bad menstrual cramps. It's a good one for that. In the old days, they used it for whooping cough and asthma and would still work. It's just that we've gotten lazy and like easier things to use than that, but it works quite well. You know, one of the things that makes rheumatoid arthritis so miserable is you have a compounding effect of not just the joint pain, but the joint pain tends to radiate to where you get muscle spasms and your muscles start to hurt. And so they tighten up, and you know, you've got joints here and joints here and joints here. And if your muscles start bearing down, they're going to put more pressure on the joint, which makes more pain, and it's just a building, compounding effect. And this plant has a little bit of an anti-inflammatory because it has salicylates in it. And so the salicylates are going to produce an anti-inflammatory effect, which is going to lower the inflammation of the joint. But it also, with the muscle relaxer in it, it's going to take this stress off the joints because the muscles aren't going to be pulling as hard. And so even though in the arthritis you've got a double compounding effect, we've got a double compounding plant to work against both of the aspects of the negative symptoms. It has a mild sedative in it, and I like to use it in blends. I like to blend this with other nervine herbs or other antispasmodics. Now, by a nervine, I'm talking about something that works on the central nervous system as a relaxant or as a mild depressant to alleviate pain or to slow you down just a little bit. You know, things you could say chamomile might even be a nervine because it will slow you down. It has a very, very gentle sedative in it. Now, the dosages are important on this plant. I don't want to get ahead of you on this one because this is one that you want to use carefully. And I'm not saying so carefully you have to be afraid of it. You just got to use some common sense. No more than 3 of the single-aught capsules per hour. I've seen people, you know, they say, well, I'm making this great big pot of this black cohosh tea and I'm going to pour it down until I quit hurting. Well, you might quit hurting for a long time. Typical dosage would be 1 to 4 capsules 3 times daily. That's the normal dose that you will be using. If you have to use it in a advanced dosage, no more than 3 capsules per hour. That is the max. If you're going to do a decoction, I would take the equivalent of 1 teaspoon of the root granules, and I would make 1 cup of water, simmer that for 15 minutes, and do not use more than a cup per hour, and that's too much, really. About a half to 3/4 would be about all you'd want to do per hour with this particular herb. If you're just going to take 1 cup and that's it, go ahead and drink the cup. But if you're planning on in an hour to drink another one, you're still going to have a little of the residual from the first one, so back off a little bit and try and see if a half a cup is going to work for you.
How many
Dennis?
days maximum should you use something like this?
Well, one thing about muscle relaxers, I don't care if they come from the pharmacy or if they come out of the woods. They only work for about 10 days and then they don't have any effect anymore. Your body gets used to them. And so you have a really bad messed up spot in your back or your neck or whatever, and you go to the doctor and he gives you some muscle relaxer. Oh man, what a miracle. This works so great. Well, if you didn't fix the problem, you've only got about 10 days of relief, and then you're going to be back in the same boat you were before. So you want to work on whatever problem it is and get it out of there. Blessed thistle is our next one in the bees. It's called holy thistle, Benedictine thistle, Saint Benedict's thistle, blessed cardus. There's a whole bunch of names for these things. Everywhere you go, they got different names. The confusing thing is when you have the same name for different things depending where you go. And one guy calls this a snake root, and that guy calls that a snake root, and it's, well, which is what? I'm confused. That's why I like to go by the Latin descriptions. If you ever have any questions, then get your herb book out and look up the Latin description and make sure that you're talking the same terms with somebody else. You say, are you talking about? And you say, for this one, the Latin description is Cardus benedictus. Say, you know, are that what you? No, I wasn't talking about that. And you find out they're actually talking about Canadian bull thistle or something else. You gotta be talking the same things to be accurate. Parts to use are the root. We can use the aerial parts and the seeds. And many times if you buy it, you're going to get a blend of all of the above. You never really know unless you specify, or it does specify exactly what you're going to get. Most of the time you're going to be just getting the upper part of the plant, and they're not going to take the time to dig the root up unless that's what you specify. Primarily used for relactation. If you have someone that you're working with who is going to be having a baby and they haven't had one in the house for a long time, and maybe their hormones just aren't really doing the thing, this is one to use with it. It helps to secrete more milk. I've used it with a number of people who were adopting children, who were not going through pregnancy, we were able to successfully relactate or lactate for the first time. C-A-R-D-U-S. Yeah. And it will increase the flow of mother's milk. Let's say that you have somebody who's been nursing and they just don't have quite enough milk. Pediatrician says that kid's not getting enough. You're going to have to give him some cow milk or whatever, soy milk, and you just would like to get more of the mother's flow up. It will help increase and enrich the flow that is already there. I would mix it with quite a number of other herbs, which we typically do. We mix it with half a dozen other things so that we really get a good blend. But you know, I saw in one person where they had not had a child around for at least like 13 years, and a little baby came along that was adopted, and she got up to about 3/4 of his daily needs for the infant, using the herbs and just some, you know, external stimulation as well. Less common use is a diuretic. Will work. It's not my first line, but I would use it that way. Some practitioners have found it to be useful and applicable of regenerating liver. You know, somebody who's got a liver that they've destroyed by their lifestyle or by their work style, to coin a new word. Some people just work in such crummy environments that their body can't tolerate it. I've seen it in blends and formulas for inflammation of the lungs, bronchitis and pleurisy. Because it's rather vile tasting, that it can be an appetite stimulant. You know, in the old days they used to say, well, that guy doesn't have any appetite, let's give him a dose of the bitters. Straightens his liver out a little bit and he gets an appetite back, he feels better, and he begins to eat again. So you could use it for that as well. Large dosages, you don't want to go over the recommended on this because you will end up with diarrhea. And if you go past that, you'll end up throwing up everything. Strong dosages are an emetic. But you know, during the course of the relactation, we never had a problem with that in anybody. 4 single lot capsules 4 times daily, maximum of 16 a day. And in infusion, 1 teaspoon to a cup of water. I would recommend not going more than ½ a cup every 2 hours. Or if you wanted to drink a full cup, then wait 4 hours. But I would not drink more than a cup at a time of this particular plant. I don't know anybody who likes to be sick to their stomach. Now we just talked about the black cohosh. We're going to look at its cousin called blue cohosh. They're similar in some respects. We use the root and the rhizome again. They have several common phytochemicals in them. And by phyto, I'm talking about the Greek word phyto for plant. It's not phyto like a dog. Woof woof, okay? Some people thought, when I said phytochemical the first time, they thought I was talking about fighting, this chemical warfare or something. But now these are the plants that God put in the herbs, or the chemicals that God put in the herbs. We use it frequently for dysmenorrhea.
What?
Dysmenorrhea.
Really?
How do you spell that?
Let me spell this one for you. D-Y-S-M-E-N-O-R-R-H-E-A. The inventor of that word certainly didn't speak English.
H-E-A?
That's right, H-E-A. It is definitely a good antispasmodic, and so we like to use it when we have menstrual cramps that are more profuse or stronger than what people can handle. You might use a low dose of this in a hot foot bath. You might even apply a cold pack over the abdomen for just a little bit to try and drive some of that out of there if you're not getting the action that you want. You can use it for people who have stomach cramps, just, you know, indigestion type stomach cramps. It has an anti-inflammatory action to it, although not very much. It is really, it's so low that I wouldn't say that it really fits into that ballpark or into that category. It works just like black cohosh to relieve the muscle spasms of arthritis pain, and so sometimes I use the two together to try and kind of get a better balance to get that effect to happen. I use it for my horses. About 3 weeks before they're ready to foal, we began to start giving them a dose of this every day, and makes foaling a lot easier. And so many of the natural-minded midwives or lay midwives will give this to their ladies for their last week of their pregnancy, maybe the last couple of weeks of pregnancy, and makes the birthing process quite a bit easier. We have a caution about using it during pregnancy, so that's why I say do not use it until the last 2 weeks or so, because in case it might cause an early birth, if you're only a week out, you're probably going to be okay. I've only found the necessity of inducing delivery one time, and we used this with several other herbs to make that happen. The lady was had such bad toxemia that we had to do something. Do not use it in pregnancy or heart disease or high blood pressure are your cautions. I want to give you the doses on this one. In capsules, 4 single-out capsules, 3 or 4 times daily. If you want to make it in a decoction, 2 ounces, 3 or 4 times daily.
2 ounces?
2 ounces, 3 or 4 times daily.
How many caps?
How many caps? 4 single-out capsules, 3 or 4 times daily. Everybody still writing, or are they ready to zoom on to the burdocks? We're going to go through a lot of plants. This is a college course you're taking. Everybody knows what a burdock plant is? No? Cocklebur? You guys haven't had a Cocker Spaniel at your house, or you'd known what was all wadded up in their ears and all over their legs. Okay, that's the plant. As aggravating as it is, it's good medicine. People call it cocklebur, beggar button, cockle button. The Latin name for it is Articum lapa, or A-R-C-T-I-U-M-L-A-P-P-A. We use the whole plant, but primarily we use the root. The root is the most frequently used, although there are parts that we can use out of various parts of it. In the fresh root, there are significant doses of insulin. So if you're a diabetic and you're getting ready for the time of trouble, you better go out and start planting these things everywhere.
Plant one, you'll have enough.
Yeah, plant one and have a dog on the farm and it'll be everywhere. It's actually a good cash crop. You can make like, what, $4,000 an acre, I think, off of this stuff if you'll...
Must be fun to harvest.
Yeah, don't wear any furry clothes when you go out and harvest. And shave your beard. We use it as a blood purifier most of the time. It's a good blood purifier. It's a good standby. You can always rely on it. I use it in mild amounts. I don't use it in heavy doses, because if you put it in a heavy dose, people are going to get diarrhea and they're going to be mad at you and they're going to stop taking it, especially if you give it to them long term. It has a bit of a laxative. It has a mild diuretic. Where I use it the most is with people with arthritis. That's the biggest all-time use that I have for it. People with arthritis, because it will take all the little acid crystals that are built up in all the little joints and it will blow them out of there in 24 hours. Clean them right out. Gout, rheumatism, all these things, give them a big drink of this decoction and you're going to see big changes between today and tomorrow. You may have to do it for a week with somebody who's really in trouble, but it's really, really useful.
And that's the root.
That's the root. I like it because of the tissue and blood purifying potential. I like to use it for skin disorders like psoriasis and eczema, who really stem from polluted tissue and polluted blood. You can also use it externally by making compresses to put over those particular afflictions. You could make it from the leaves. You could make it from a poultice of the leaves or a compress of the decoction and with a compress and put it right on the area. Although some skin disorders don't like to be wet. So you might want to make an infused oil or a salve out of these things for your external application and not get them wet. It's very good for restoring the liver and gallbladder functions, and the leaves probably would be more used for that because they're going to have more of the bitter things in them than the root's going to have in it. It's not a good salad green, I can assure you. That's not where I'd go for salad. It does have, from all parts of the plant, a very mild stimulating effect on the immune system. I like it for making a salve or an infused oil or in a tincture because this plant has a mild antimicrobial or antibacterial function and will work for treating skin disorders, again, like boils, acne, infections. I'd probably mix it with lavender. I always like to give things a, if I'm going to go out and hunt ducks, I want a double barrel shotgun, not a single barrel shotgun. So I like to mix things a lot of time. This is the only way you're tough enough to pull both barrels at once.
You don't do that anymore.
No, I gave up eating quackers. You can use it for cysts in the urinary tract. The decoction's very, very strong and very cleansing for the urinary tract. And where you have like urinary cystitis and that type of a problem, bladder cysts, it will really do a good job of cleaning that up. One caution, and I think you probably already know this caution in the back of your head, but let's tell it for you anyway in case you're not thinking about it. Avoid using it with people who are suffering from hypoglycemia. Remember, it's got insulin in it. That's the last thing these people need. If they're already down under the threshold, don't whack them over the head with anything more to make it any worse. Let's go for the dosage. 4 single-out capsules 4 times daily. If you wanted, you could take all 16 all at once. If you could swallow that many of the little things. But if you'll spread it out, you're going to have less problems having diarrhea or anything.
For external uses for skin disorders and things like that, or boils on somebody who's hypoglycemic, it shouldn't really cause.
No, you're not going to absorb enough to have a problem. It's basically going to be absorbing whatever's in there out more than it will be putting anything in. Just the internal caution. Decoction, it doesn't taste that bad. It kind of tastes like dirt. When I drink the tea, it's kind of like lapping up a mud puddle or whatever, but it's not that bad. 3 cups daily. Any more than that, and you're going to be running for the restroom. It may bother some people a little more than others. Some people may say they can't handle quite this much, and then you got some of these guys with a cast iron gut who could drink a gallon every hour and it won't bother them. But for most people, this is about the top of the line for them. Butcher's broom is our next one. Butcher's broom or broom. People have different names for it. I'll spell this Latin name. I don't know that I can enunciate it right.
In your first root herb rhizome, you were saying of the fresh root, it was a teaspoon to a cup. Are you assuming that all of these are fresh, and you're using a teaspoon of fresh root to a cup?
No, I'm assuming a dried.
So usually this is going to be
Yeah.
a dry teaspoon to a
Yeah.
cup. Okay.
The only thing that I mentioned on the burdock for the fresh root contains the insulin. That's really very few that you're actually going to use a fresh with. When you dry the dry the burdock root down, you lose some of that good insulin effect. Not all of it, but quite a bit of it. Butcher's broom, Latin description is Ruscus. And these almost always come in two words. The next word is Aculeatus. Aculeatus. Someday I'm going to have this all on a laptop multimedia system where I just pop it up on the screen and it's all typed in, and that's about $10,000 away. I don't know if the good Lord's got intentions for me to spend $10,000 to do this, or maybe He just wants me to spend that somewhere else. We're going to use the seeds and the seed tops. You're just going to snip these right off. If you can grow it in your own area, if you're going to buy it, that's how they've done it. Seeds and seed tops are the parts to use. It has a mild anti-inflammatory. But I wouldn't say that this is an anti-inflammatory herb, because it has a more powerful side to it that does other things to your body. And if you had to use it in sufficient quantities for an anti-inflammatory, you'd have so many other things going on that I don't know you could take care of them all at once. The best use that I know of is used in people who have diminished circulation because of diabetes, where you have a lot of your peripheral circulation beginning to degenerate and to be diminished, especially in your extremities. This is an excellent one for opening all that back up again and allowing the circulation to continue anyway. Okay, of course, you're going to discover when you do that, you're going to drop your blood pressure if you have high blood pressure. So it works for high blood pressure as well. I think it works pretty well when you have occluded arteries or thrombosis, either one. It would be a treatment of choice if you were working with phlebitis. And I think that if you used it long term, there's not a side effect with it. And if you're dealing with somebody who has diabetes, you could probably postpone or prevent a lot of this destructive side of diabetes, where you begin to see people losing their feet and having problems with their what they call neuropathy in their eyes and that type of thing. I think you could either prevent or at least significantly postpone any or all of those. This is one where you sometimes have to kind of do trial and error to figure out where you're at on the dosage. And so I tell people to start out low and work up to where they find where their good level is at, and then stop there. And you may be able to discover that by just checking your blood pressure every day. Find out where your optimum blood pressure is going to be achieved and think you're pretty close right there. The encapsulated 3 of the single-lot capsules 2 times daily. Rather than me repeating single-lot every time, let's just say they're all in single-lot dosages. It'll make it easy for you. 3 capsules 2 times daily. I recommend starting with 1 capsule 2 times daily, and let's see what happens. If that's not enough, you could come up to the upper threshold, but we don't want to have people using more of anything than they have to. Now, the optimum in herbology is for all of these things to be short-term. We're looking at restoring people, not giving them veggie crutches to live on. But in a case where you've got like a juvenile diabetic, where there's no hope of a reversal in almost all the cases, I would certainly rather see them on a veggie crutch than dying early, or a veggie crutch versus a chemical crutch. But I am afraid that many people who work with herbal medicine forget that this is just for now. Let's fix the problem with this and whatever else we can do with our diet and our exercise and all of the 10 laws. And let's not have these people or ourselves on this forever and ever and ever. I caught myself in a trap where I was using herbs daily. You know, every day I was taking this and taking that, and I said, man, I'm a junkie on weeds. I thought I was going to get well and quit this thing. And so I just made a conscious effort, and I discovered that I hadn't taken any weeds in months. Or, you know, the same can be done with vitamins. The same can be done with taking too much of one good food. You know, you can overdo it on carrot juice or anything else. There's everything in its season and in a proper amount. Let's look at catnip. The Latin description is Nepeta space Cataria. If you can't spell that, it's meow. We use the aerial parts of the plant. This plant, I think, is indigenous to everywhere, except the desert. But it grows anywhere I've ever else been. We use the aerial parts. By the aerial parts, I'm talking about the upper parts, the stuff that's up, not the heavy stem, but all the leafy things and buds, the light stems. It's an antispasmodic. It's a really good antispasmodic. You have somebody who has diarrhea or abdominal cramps, that's one of the things to give them. You might want to moderate it a little bit with a little bit of peppermint. And sometimes the two together work better than one by themselves. It's a mild sedative. I've seen people use it to help themselves sleep at night where they had a real mild case of insomnia. I know people who use it to deal with an upset stomach. It'll calm an upset stomach many times. Especially if you're going to do that, I would say probably put the peppermint with it. We learned that if we would put a little bit of peppermint and a little bit of catnip and make a tea out of this or an infusion and give it to babies with colic, we got to go back to bed in less than 10 minutes. Give them about a half a cup of nice warm infusion in their bottle and sweeten it up enough that they'll drink it, and they'll slurp that down, and you start to pat on them, and maybe a minute to maybe 2 minutes, you'll get a big burp, and you're done. Put baby back to bed and go back to bed. I've seen it.
Equal parts?
Equal parts. I've seen that happen over and over and over and over. Anybody I've ever recommended it to has always told me the next day, hey, we can sleep at night now. Praise the Lord. Because anybody knows a baby with colic is not a very happy camper.
What do you sweeten it with? Because babies can't have honey.
Well, a little bit of sugar or maple syrup or something, but catnip, half catnip, half peppermint if you're going to do them together.
How much dilution?
Always a teaspoon to a cup. I'm talking about dried things. If you're going to use fresh things, you have to use quite a bit more. Antispasmodic in case of the diarrhea and cramping, sedative or insomnia, calming your stomach, good tool for colic. You know, sometimes when you give people a high enema, their colon gets so spastic they can't retain it long enough to soften anything up. I like to dump a little catnip in with that, and it calms that spastic colicky activity out of the colon right now, and so you can retain a high enema long enough for it to soften and to cleanse. It helps to stimulate sweating. And so if I'm thinking I'm going to come down with the flu, I'm going to mix half catnip and half yarrow, and I'm going to make an infusion, and I'm going to drink a whole boatload of that, and I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to sweat that plague off by morning. Works very consistently with most of these things. It also has been purported to stimulate the appetite and to help to regulate digestion. I've never used it for that, but that's textbook. Your dosage is going to be 3 capsules 4 times daily, maximum. And you could drink a cup of the infusion 3 times in a day and do quite well. Okay, let's go for another one or two, but I think that we're all about to the end of our attention span here pretty quick. Cayenne. Maybe that'll spice us up enough to make another one or so. Let's talk about cayenne. It also is known as bird pepper. Your Latin name is capsicum. C-A-P-S-I-C-U-M. F-R-U-T-E-S-C-E-N-S. F-R-U-T-E-S-C-E-N-S. I think we're all quite aware of how hot this stuff is. Some of us think it tastes good. I love the flavor of it. I wish we could turn the heat down and the flavor up. I'd be one of those who could very easily be guilty of putting it on everything. You know, when I gargle with salt and cayenne, I go, oh, it tastes so good. I wish I could swallow it. We use it for lowering blood pressure. It will dilate the arteries and blood vessels. But it's a short-term thing. We don't want to see people on this one very long. A week or two, and then let's get them off. Let's get them over with whatever it is or on to something else that's not going to have the problems this one might have. Like I mentioned, for sore throats and oral ulcers, it's very healing. Topically, it kills bacteria and cleanses the area up. It has a chemical substance in that will interfere with the neurotransmitters who tell you that you're hurting and actually give you a sedative effect there and block the pain transmission so that your mind doesn't know how bad it hurts, for like sores in your mouth. And I've seen it be very healing for canker sores and that type of thing. You think, oh man, cayenne and a canker sore? Yeah, really. Takes the pain out of it, makes you feel better, makes you be able to go to sleep at night because you don't hurt anymore, and it's healing. If you're bleeding internally or externally, it's excellent. A lady called me, you know, I never know when people call me on the telephone what I'm going to get for a question. And you have to be prepared for the Holy Spirit to tell you what to do. This lady called and she said, I have pretty profuse bleeding rectally, and I can't get out of where I'm at. She was way up in the mountains somewhere. What can I do? Now, I suspect she was an enema freak or a colonic freak who uses this far more than it ought to be done. And so she was bleeding, I think, from that. I don't know. And I said, well, what do you have in your herb drawer? Well, I don't have this, and I don't. She didn't have much of anything. And I said, well, how about in the cupboard? Do you have any cayenne pepper? And she said, are you crazy? I said, no, I'm not crazy. What are your alternatives? Well, what would I do with it? And I said, you'd make a tea out of it, and then you'd inject that with a bulb syringe or an enema bag or whatever. And she said, you're out of your mind. And I said, no, do you want to bleed or not? And she said, no, I don't want to bleed. I said, how bad are you bleeding? She said, I'm bleeding profusely. I said, then get to it. She called back about an hour and a half later, and she's a professional singer, and she said, you should have heard the high C. But she said, thank you, I'm not bleeding anymore, it's all taken care of. I was praying on that one too. It's a stimulant. It's not a neurological stimulant, it's a systemic stimulant. There is a little bit of a difference. And you can take people who have low battery and tweak their battery up a little bit. But you don't want to always be crying wolf, okay? Because when you need it, it won't work. Some people, oh man, this stuff's good stuff, and they pour it on their food 3 meals a day. Well, when they ever need it, it's not going to work for them. Their body's going to have become totally immune to it, and it will not be any benefit to them at all. If you don't have access to medical attention and you're about to have a heart attack, go ahead and take about 3 capsules of this stuff, and you probably won't have your heart attack. It'll strengthen that and avert the heart attack, help to regulate the beat. You can use it internally for pleurisy and externally. Make a plaster and put it over the your upper part of your chest. I don't know how long you want to keep it there because it's going to get a little bit hot, especially if you put a little bit of mustard with it for a plaster. I've used it to heal ulcers. If you have a bleeding ulcer, you could take some cayenne pepper tea and drink it down, or some capsules, and it will cauterize the bleeding and stop it. But you're going to want to put some other things with it to try and coat that and soothe that and keep that from having problems. And I guess the only caution is the overuse that I see. It's not a food, it's a medicine. And we know that it seems to be a digestive irritant when it's cooked. But we don't notice that when it's in its raw or dried state. Are you ready for a break?
Yes.
Let's do a break.